Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 33rd day of our 47-day Lenten journey. This is JM, and now we're going to listen to the fifth Sunday of Lent sermon by Father Mike Schmitz. So, without further ado, let's jump right into the fifth Sunday of Lent, and our gospel for today is taken from the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verses 1 to 11. So
The Lord
let
be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John, chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, but early in the morning he arrived again in the temple area, and all the people started coming to him, and he sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery and made her stand in the middle. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" They said this to test him so that they could have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and began to write on the ground with his finger. But when they continued asking him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again he bent down and wrote on the ground. And in response, they went away, one by one, beginning with the elders. So he was left alone with the woman before him. Then Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She replied, "No one, sir." Then Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, do not sin anymore." The Gospel of the Lord. So I have a friend who spent a lot of time in her early life raising chickens. In fact, it was a situation where in 4-H here in Minnesota, we have a kind of 4-H is kind of big in Minnesota. And so she spent like years, 7, 8 years raising chickens and showing chickens. You go to the county fair, right? And if you're good enough in the county fair, you go on to the state fair and maybe beyond that kind of a situation. So much of her life was surrounding this raising and showing of chickens. And then she told me that one summer, or late spring, early summer, a mink got into the chicken coop. And I had no idea about this. She was describing how, like a fox, if a fox comes into the chicken coop, a fox would grab a chicken and run away with it, right? It takes one chicken and goes. And she was like, mink are vicious. Like they're like the mass murderers of the whatever world. In the sense that she said a mink would come into the chicken coop and like slits the necks of all the chickens. Like it's not just one chicken, like a fox would take one chicken away. The mink goes in and again, just cuts the throats of every one of the chickens. And she said at one point, late summer or late spring, early summer, a mink got into the chicken coop. And she said the sound, it was horrible. Just this absolute like terror for like 20, 40 seconds coming from the chicken coop as this mink literally killed every one of the chickens in the chicken coop. And then opening up and seeing like, oh my gosh, this is devastation, horrible. Not only was all the chickens dead, of course, but also her dreams that been raising these chickens to show these chickens, right? The goal to get to the county fair, the goal to get to the state fair. And what do you do? Like, what do you do in a place where there's nothing left, right? What do you do in a place where everything I was counting on is now gone? I cannot show my chickens. So that summer, she didn't only enter the county fair, but she entered the state fair and actually went to nationals for preparing grilled chicken. It was a situation where here is this the loss, right? This everything was gone, everything was lost, and there was a complete dead end. But actually went even further, all the way to nationals with their grilled chicken recipe, which again is one of those fascinating things. It's kind of a funny thing. Yet at the same time, we all experience this, right? At the same time, we have experienced what happens when the things we had hoped in run out. Like what happens when we're living and we're like, okay, all the things I counted on, they're all broken. What happens when you and I have reached the dead end? What happens when you and I have reached the dead end where there's nowhere to go? There's nowhere to pivot. There's no silver lining here. It's just the dead end. This whole Lent, we've been being reminded of the fact that the Lent is not just a season where we have more discipline or have more self-denial, or we just kind of get slightly better or slightly holier, but Lent is a season of training, right? Asceticism, that word ascesis means training. And so we've been training with a goal, and the goal is I want to become more like Jesus. I want to look more like Jesus at the end of this Lent than I did at the beginning of this Lent. And so this time of Lent is a dojo, right? Christ's dojo. And that word dojo, the Japanese word dojo, in English means the place of the way. So this whole Lent we've been talking about the place of the way is, enter into silence. That's the place of the way. And the desert and the crossroads and the valley. Last weekend was to learn how to live at home in the presence of the Father is the place of the way. This weekend, we realize the truth, and that is this: the place of the way is the dead end. The place of the way is where there is nothing left I have to offer. The place of the way is when I'm broken and I can do no more. The place of the way is the dead end. And I think about that in the gospel today. This gospel is horrible. Just terrible beginning of the story of the woman caught in adultery. And this is the dead end. Because why? Because here is what the scribes and Pharisees say. Moses commanded us in the law to stone such women. She literally this is her dead end. She is so broken. She's in their minds, in their eyes, and how they saw her, maybe how she saw herself. She's broken beyond repair. And here's a question. What is our temptation when we encounter the dead end? What's our temptation when we encounter that place, maybe like the woman here caught in adultery? I think our temptation is one of two things. Either we're tempted to excuse ourselves, or we're tempted to condemn ourselves. Right? We're tempted to excuse ourselves. Well, you might have even done this when you heard this story where they bring this woman. You say, hey, she was caught in the very act of committing adultery. And maybe your thought was, wait, what about the guy? And that's not a bad question. Like the excuse, the excuse is like, wait a second. Obviously that's real, right? Takes two to tango. No one argues that. But our temptation to excuse ourselves and say, well, wait, there's someone else involved. Someone else also sinned. That's true, but it's not an argument. That's what we do though, right? Oftentimes we say, well, I'm no worse than anyone else. So we've been following the story of Takashi Nagai this entire Lent. Takashi Nagai, who was born in 1900-something in Japan. He was raised Shinto, became an atheist. On his way to becoming a Catholic, he encountered a Catholic author named Blaise Pascal. And Blaise Pascal has a series of thoughts, in French, pensées, right? A series of thoughts that was really intriguing for Takashi Nagai. But at one point, he not only found Blaise Pascal's thoughts intriguing, he also sometimes resented a few of them. In fact, Blaise Pascal's last thought in The Wager is this. He says, only Christianity, makes a bold claim. He says, only Christianity makes men both happy and lovable. Another way to say it is, only Christianity makes men both happy and good. And Takashi did not like that because he said, actually, I know a lot of people who are happy and good. He even pointed to his parents. He said, my parents are good people and they're happy people. And yet at the same time, later on, he would realize that, okay, are they good or are they good enough? He would look at himself and say, no, I'm good. You have to ask the question, okay, am I good or am I just kind of, quote unquote, good enough? Because why? Because his parents might have been good, but they're normal. And he was normal. This is just what people do. People, they might not be amazing, but they're not horrible. And this is the temptation. Again, when we find ourselves in that dead end, we say, yeah, maybe I'm not the best person who's ever lived, but I'm definitely not the worst, Or we say things like, well, here's the thing. I did this because in my case, right? We have this temptation again and again when we find ourselves at the dead end to excuse ourselves. Here's the problem. In the gospel today, she's guilty, right? Even the scripture says, Jesus, we caught her in the very act, which again, aside from being kind of creepy, the fact that they busted in on her in the moment of this committing adultery, the fact is she was guilty. In fact, I don't know. I was looking in my Bible, preparing for this weekend for a number of weeks now. And the header over this section of my scripture says the woman caught in adultery. And it just convicted me where I was like, wait a second. All we need is those first three words, the woman caught. Because I think sometimes we might say, oh, the woman caught in adultery, and we might excuse ourselves and be tempted to have the self-excuse, well, I've never done that. I've never committed adultery, or I would never commit adultery. And the key word here, though, is she's caught. And the reality is for any of us, We can be caught in the midst of anything that could be that thing. Like those moments when you and I, we realize, okay, this is the truth. And I'm caught in my sin, or I'm caught in my shame, or even I'm caught by my illness, or I'm caught by my limitation. Sometimes I find myself at the dead end moment of I'm caught in my pain, or I'm caught in my sorrow, or I'm caught in my loss. Basically, that moment, every one of us have to experience where it's so broken. I on my own can't fix this, right? I'm caught in the dead end, where I realize that if I'm going to be honest, there is no excuse, there is no argument. This pain or this shame or this brokenness, this is my dead end. And again, the option then is what? The option is self-condemnation, because those are, in our world, those are the only two options that we do, how we deal with dead ends. Either we deny them or we're defined by them. The brokenness, no, there's no big deal. Or the brokenness, yeah, that is my identity. In fact, you look at St. Paul, right into the Philippians today.